All right, so right now we are inside of qTest. This is what we call qTest Manager. qTest, it is comprised of a variety of modules. For the scope of today's conversation, I'm mainly going to be focusing on Manager, which is where what I consider the heart of qTest, where all of the testing activities are going to happen, where we'll be able to set up our integration with Jira, we'll be able to track requirements, design test cases, execute test cases, and so on. But I do wanted to make a point that qTest is much more than just test management. We have Insights, which is a very powerful reporting module. Once we're able to centralize all of your testing activities with qTest, we can then leverage Insights to create out-of-the-box reports or even custom reports. We also have ways of documenting all of our manual sessions. So if you're heavily doing exploratory testing or a lot of manual testing, sessions can be a great way to help you streamline the documentation of all of those sessions by tracking your tester moves and very quickly creating images and attachments that you can easily edit and send around as reports. We also have quite a bit of automation utility. So Pulse and Launch are two automation modules. Launch allows you to centrally manage your automation and schedule your automation from within qTest. So if you're using something like Selenium or any open source framework, or even commercial automation like UFT, you'll be able to schedule that from within qTest. Pulse is a little bit more mature module.
So,
for
Andrew, one question.
Go ahead.
In the launch, you mentioned a couple of tools. Also, it will support the workshop as well.
I would have to dive a little bit deeper into the specific use case, but yes, for the most part, we can launch all forms of automation with Launch.
I have a question here, Andrew. So will we be able to launch any CLI? Means to say that right now we are able to launch the workshop using the CLI command line interface. Will we be able to launch the CLI via this launch, whatever we are having here?
Yeah, you'll be able, and we can dive a little bit deeper into Launch towards the end of the call and how that would look and work. But yeah, you'll be able to give it some custom commands. So you could do CLI commands or point it to a GitHub repository, for example, where you have your unit tests, and then give it a pretty simple execute script to allow to execute those scripts, then consume the results back, parse them, and bring into qTest. All right, but let's head into Manager, since I think there's a lot of interest for maybe some of the other modules. So let's make good use of our time. Inside of Manager, you'll find all of the functionality for test planning, requirements, test design, and test execution. We try to make qTest as flexible as possible. So one of the main things that I want to highlight is the ability to have a variety of different projects. And if you notice, some of my projects are integrated with Jira. Some of them are integrated with some other planning tools. Some projects are just as a standalone tool. So even though we can integrate with Jira to allow you to do all of your planning inside of Jira, you don't have to have that. If some teams don't want to work inside of Jira, they can use qTest to track their requirements and their test plan as a standalone tool. But again, the main theme is the flexibility in which you can organize your teams across the organization. Now, for today, let's focus on a project that is integrated with Jira, since I think that it's important for you guys. Let me go into my actual Jira project so I can illustrate how we're integrating. So in here, you can see I have a very simple Jira project. I've created a few releases, some epics, user stories, and defects. I've associated these user stories with releases and my epics. And then I've gone ahead and integrated this project with qTest. The integration is very simple. From your Jira instance, we just have to go to the marketplace, download a very lightweight plugin. This plugin will then sit on your Jira instance as a listener. We'll be able to point it to your qTest instance. And then every time an event happens in Jira, like the creation of a new user story or a defect or a release, the plugin will send that information to qTest's API in near real time. So any changes that happen in Jira are reflected in qTest, and any testing that we conduct in qTest will be able to also see a representation in Jira. So if you have some users that live strictly on Jira and they never want to go into qTest, they don't want to do anything to do with test management, but they still want to be aware of what's happening with the testing, they still have that information available to them. So let's go into qTest. I'm going to go into my test plan. And in here, we're going to be able to see those same releases that I've created in Jira. You'll see that they have the little Atlassian symbol on top of them, meaning that qTest is syncing this release in real time from Jira.
So, Andrew, sorry
Go
for the
ahead.
interruption. So can you go back to Jira? So you mentioned you have the user story, right? So in our user story, that linked the any test cases for that user story.
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
In our this Jira board, right? So you have the releases and epics and the user stories. So any one of the user story linked the any test cases, in the Jira.
Correct. And let me show you how that looks in qTest.
Yeah.
So now that you see sort of the structure that I have in Jira, I'll show you how I have that represented in qTest. So at first, we're looking at our test plan. So we're looking at these 4 releases, which are represented over here in our test plan. If we look at the properties, we can see that they're Jira properties and they're read-only, meaning that Jira is the system of record. If we want to make any changes to these fields, we can use the hyperlink, which will bring us to the specific release in Jira. In here, we can make any changes, and those changes will be reflected back in qTest. Now, qTest has its own properties too. As we mentioned, as a standalone tool, you can do your own planning in qTest without the need of Jira. But since we're using Jira specifically for this project, we're going to focus on the Jira properties. At the bottom, you can see that in my release scope, I can start seeing those user stories that I have created in Jira and I have linked to this particular release are also reflected in qTest. So if I dive deeper into one of them, maybe this enter vehicle data, I'll be guided to my requirements tab. In here, I'll see my imported from Jira folder. And these are all of the user stories that exist in my Jira project. All of them have kept their linkage to those requirements that I've built before. And this all happens in real time. Once I set up the integration, qTest automatically brings all these while keeping that linkage. Again, we can see all of the features and all the fields that qTest is reading from Jira. And just like the releases, any edits we'll do through the hyperlink, since we're keeping Jira as the system of record. Now, from this point on, this is where qTest starts taking matters into its own hands. And from this point on, we're going to be using qTest's test design capabilities and test execution capabilities to do all of our testing inside of qTest while keeping that traceability back to Jira. Any questions so far?
So this is the test user story, and the below, these are the 3 test cases linked to the user story in the Jira.
Yes. So for example, there's enter vehicle data. If I go to my Jira project, sorry, this one over here, it's this one right here, enter vehicle data. Same user story that I've created in Jira, just represented in qTest. I can see all of my Jira fields. And then down here, like you mentioned, these are the test cases that I'm starting to associate with this user story.
Can you open that user story in the Jira? I want to see the test cases in the Jira once.
Sure. If we go into enter vehicle data, let me go ahead and maximize this so we can see a little bit better. Down here, I can see these are the actual qTest test cases that I have linked with Jira. And from here, and I'll get to how we'll get these results in qTest. We can also see a representation of the latest test run results, what tests we run, whether they failed, passed, were blocked, what version did we use. and so on. So we'll have that information available in Jira as well.
Confusing, Andrew. Can you go back to once the qTest board? We see that user story. We have the 3 test cases, right? Can you go to the other the qTest? Not this one. Let it open this one, and where you see the not this one. See that we have the 5 test cases, right? So for that story,
these are the test cases that you saw in Jira. Yep.
yeah, okay, 5 test cases, and the numbering is coming from the is automatically in the qTest, or numbering is coming from the Jira. This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So from this point on, the test cases are coming from qTest. We are creating these tests inside of qTest, and the executions are happening inside of qTest. We just have a visual representation of their latest executions from Jira, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got this point. So that means eventually you have the user story, and with the test cases you are creating the qTest. But our structure is go back to the Jira. So we have the user story type is user story. Under that user story, we have the created the test cases in the Jira itself. So where we want to see the when you integrated this user story into the qTest, we want to see that the associated link test cases also in the qTest.
Andrews, do you have the test cases also written in Jira? If you see TC23, automobile enter vehicle data, do you have the test cases information over here, or you are writing the test case steps within qTest itself? Can you justify the TC23?
Yeah, it's important to make this distinction. We're using Jira solely for planning. So everything that has to do with, planning releases, planning user stories, requirements, all of that will happen inside of Jira. But once we're using qTest for testing, we won't be conducting any of our tests inside of Jira anymore. All the testing activities will now happen inside of qTest. So these tests over here are the representation of the tests that we have in qTest and have executed from within qTest. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got it. If you don't mind, can I share my screen for a while?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what I'm looking is here. Let me know, are you able to see the screen? Are you able to see the screen?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. See, in the Jira, we have the like this, the Jira story type is user story. And we created the test cases under the user story. We link the test cases like this. So based on the current, which you showed me, you maintaining your integrated this user story for the qTest, and you are maintaining the test cases in the qTest. That's fine. That is where the feature. But qTest will also support in this structure. So I have the user story, and the user stories I have linked with the 2 associated test cases. Suppose if I integrated this user story in qTest, and I can able to see the my associated linked test cases also in the qTest.
If you integrate this user story, will you be able to see the associated test cases inside of qTest?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you'll have visibility on the associated test cases inside of qTest as well.
The associated test cases which is coming from the Jira, not in the qTest. I don't maintaining the test cases in the qTest. I'm maintaining the test cases in Jira itself. So eventually what I'm saying is user story, I have the user story I maintain in the Jira, and I maintain the test cases which are linked to the user story I maintain the Jira itself. But the only thing is I integrated a user story in the qTest, then I can able to view the associated test cases also in the qTest.
Got it. So these test cases that you're associating with Jira, is this like Zephyr, or what are you using to create these test cases?
Jafar.
Zephyr?
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
So yeah, test cases that you create with Zephyr would not be displayed inside of qTest. One of the main reasons why we don't do that is that Zephyr is sitting inside of your Jira instance. Anything that you write through Zephyr is going to be written through, it's going to be written in your Jira instance. And we find that, especially as you scale, this becomes a little bit unsustainable, as the more test cases you're adding in there, the more it bogs down your Jira instance. So what we do is we offload that testing into qTest. So rather than using Sever to create your test cases, you then would be using qTest to create those test cases. Now, there are ways for you to export test case data and import it into qTest, but you would have to make a choice whether you want to use Zephyr for test management or you want to use qTest at that point. You wouldn't be able to see these test cases in qTest, no.
Okay, got it. So as you mentioned, you can export into this test cases data and import into the qTest. So say, for example, these test cases, then I can export these test cases and I can import into the qTest for the associated the user story. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a variety of ways that we can do that. One of the ways is, I'm not sure of the functionality within Zephyr, but if there's a way to export it as an Excel spreadsheet, for example, we could use that Excel to upload into qTest.
Okay, got it. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, okay, you can.
Did that help clarify that?
Yes, yeah, I got it. I clarified it. That's what I want to, as you mentioned that feature in the qTest, but in the current, our structure is so that I'm comparing both the current our structure and the qTest feature. And thank you.
And that's how you are supporting the other clients. I mean, majority of the clients, whoever are using the Jira, they are using the Zephyr as well for test management. So how do you do that? I think you are offboarding Zephyr and onboarding qTest to support Jira, or what is your common practice?
Yeah, what we usually find is our customers that are coming from Zephyr are usually looking for a solution that can scale. They've usually hit the limit that they can take with Zephyr. So they want to bring the testing outside of Jira. So we do have ways to support that. We do have professional services teams that, if you want to offboard that effort into them, we can definitely help out with that. Likewise, there are ways that you can export that test data and then re-import it into qTest. Or what some customers do is just a gradual transition, correct? So they might keep Zephyr for a while, but then start moving all their testing activities into qTest. And then at one point, qTest just becomes the sole system while leaving Zephyr behind.
But as an end user, will it be matter whether we use the qTest or the Zephyr? Is there going to be any change in the look and feel from the Jira side? Maybe creating the test cases.
From the Jira side, you won't have any changes. Jira will act and behave the same. The only difference is that you will be offloading testing activities into qTest. So you no longer would be creating test cases inside of Jira using Zephyr. All of that activity would happen inside of qTest. And I'm curious.
Yeah, that's going to be a caveat, Andrews. I think when we want to have all the test cases to be created in the Jira, we should not be creating in the outside of the Jira, because when our project managers or product managers are not willing to move out of Jira. They wanted to see all the test cases within the Jira itself.
Of course, part of your product management team can have access to qTest, so that if they needed to go into qTest to either create test cases or see the status of tests, they could do that. We also make it available for them to be able to see testing results from within Jira. So if they don't want anything to do with qTest, they can still live in Jira while being able to see the state of testing for each particular user story. And that's not to mention then the reporting capabilities of qTest. We haven't gotten to them yet, but those are available to users even outside of qTest. So you wouldn't need a license for reporting in that case.
Do you think when we can take only reporting reporting model of the qTest and integrating with the Jira to just to have the reporting done through the Zephyr? No?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
No, did you say that, I mean, we can buy just a reporting module?
qTest comes with its own reporting module. So
Okay, understand.
yeah, all of
No,
your
I think our debate is, right, I think, I mean, if you wanted to go outside of the Jira, I mean, qTest is not the only tool. I mean, there are multiple tools that we can use, right? I mean, even we can go to the Micro Focus, HP, Micro Focus ALM as well.
yeah,
You know what I'm
absolutely.
saying?
There are a lot of options in the market at the moment.
Correct.
Now, the idea of going with qTest is you're going to have a solution that one will scale with you, two has access to a lot of DevOps features that maybe some of the other tools might not have, and three, you're going to have all of that testing capability and streamline possibilities to centralize that testing into one place and then be able to report. So even outside of Jira, you'll be able to have all those testing activities. Now, if you want to live only within Jira and you're comfortable with that, yeah, qTest will not live in that space.
I see. But do we have any comparison sheet between the tools that are available in the market, Anders, to show, I mean, why qTest is going to be best tool to pick it up?
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely send you guys some information how we compare to some of our
Based on the
competition.
features, I think. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, now that we're here, I can also show you some of the stuff to see if
Sure.
some of these functionality can apply.
Okay.
All right, let me go back into my screen.
Mhm.
So far I've shown you how we can integrate with Jira so that you can keep your planning inside of Jira. What we haven't seen is some of the features that qTest offers when it comes to testing. So we've brought in our test plan and our requirements. We've linked some test cases to our requirement. Let's go ahead and dive into one of the test cases. This will bring us into test design. And test design is really where we start building all of our tests from within qTest. There's a couple of features that I think are pretty nifty in here. For example, the ability to share test cases among all your projects. So I can create a test case once. I can choose to share it with other projects, and then all those projects will be able to use that same test case. If I want to make any changes, I can come to the master test case, makes those changes, and then they will be reflected across all those projects that are currently using it. We also have versioning history. So any changes that happen, we can keep track of, as well as your usual fields like the status of the test case, whether it's manual or automation type. We can assign it to specific testers as well. We can create custom fields. As an example, I have one where if I think one of my manual test cases is an automation candidate, I can click on yes. This will send an email to my automation engineer telling him, hey, this is a candidate for automation. And then he can get to work. Likewise, what is a test case without the test steps that make up the test? Down here, we find the specific test or steps that a tester would need to take to satisfy this test case. And there's a couple of features in here that are worth highlighting. One of them being our parameters feature. Rather than hard coding certain values on the test case, for example, in this step, we're asking the tester to choose a vehicle make from a drop-down field. And rather than tell him or her, hey, choose a BMW or choose an Audi, we can give it a parameter that contains all those values. When we go run the test on our test execution, qTest will then ask us, hey, I've noticed that there's a parameter in this test case. Would you like me to create different permutations to make sure that you cover all of your different data combinations? We can tell qTest to test all combinations, or we can tell qTest to at least choose one unique combination so that we can make sure we're testing all of those different choices and cutting down quite a bit of work on recreating test cases and so on. Now, when it comes time to execute the tests, we can come to our test execution tab. In here, I have the historic results for all of the executions that have happened inside of this project. So in this case, you can see the total at the very top. You can also see it breaking down by release. And if I dive into one of these releases, I can see my test suites. The test suites are the compilations of test cases that I've run. It's up to you how you want to structure your test suites, whether it's by application or project or release or sprint. We're pretty flexible on how you like to do that. And running tests is fairly simple and straightforward in qTest. These are all manual test cases. If I select one of them and click run, it'll go ahead and pull up my test pad. Again, this is the guide that manual tester will need to follow. But you'll notice that qTest has changed those parameters to now include actual values. As a tester, I can then follow the guide. In this case, it's asking me to fill out an insurance form. And I can pass or fail and so on, different steps. As I pass and fail them, I can input actual results. I can add any documentation or evidence of that step or failure. And then I can go ahead and log a defect right from the test pad. Because we're integrated with Jira, qTest will ask us if we want to include all of the tested details, which includes all of the steps until where it failed, whether we want to create a new defect, or if we've already found this bug in the past, we can scan for it and link it to the specific test. I'm going to create new. It'll ask me what Jira project do I want to put it in and what type of issue I'm adding. In this case, I'm doing a bug. And when I add, it brings me back into Jira again, because for this project, Jira is the system of record. I'm going to go ahead and create a new bug over here. I can see that qTest has auto-filled my description with the results up until the one that failed. I'll go ahead and create it. This will log a defect into Jira, but will also be represented inside of qTest. So if I go back into my test pad, I can see that this defect is now logged down here. And if I wanted to go back to it, I can always go to the hyperlink, and this will always bring that defect in Jira. After I'm done with this step, I can go ahead and maybe mark this whole test case as failed. I can save, exit out of here. And if I go back into my execution, I can see that that latest test was run 2 minutes ago. I can see the defects that have been logged. If I looked into qTest, even though the defects have been logged into Jira, I also have a record of this defect right over here. And I can always go back to that defect directly from qTest. Likewise, I have access to all of my execution history for this particular test case. So if I dive a little bit deeper into it, I can see that I've run this test case about 11 different times. I found some bugs along the way, and I can also see the latest execution of my test steps. I can see what defects are linked to this particular test case. I can see what requirement or user story this defect is linked to, and I can always hyperlink back into that particular user story. So keeping that traceability from Jira to your test executions while uploading all of that testing overhead into qTest. So far, so good?
Yeah, this is a nice feature, Andrew. So what is the test plan tab? There is one more test plan.
Over here?
Yeah.
This is the first tab where we started. This is where our release plan is stored. So these are the releases that we created in Jira, and basically is the structure by which we're organizing our teams to do the testing. So this test plan tab is really up to you how you want to organize it, because I'm bringing it from Jira. I'm organizing it by releases, but some teams organize it by sprint. Some teams will do it by monthly releases, by project, or by team. It really is up to you. What matters at the end is this structure will help you report at the very end. So insights, depending on how you structure your project, it'll make it very easy for you to filter the different modules and releases so that you can see as wide or as granular data as you need.
Okay.
I don't say is it a one way or the two ways? Are the releases that were pulled from the Jira? If you create a new release here, I mean, that is going to be updating back in the Jira as well?
So you can create a new release from qTest, but if you're integrating a project with Jira, it definitely is best practice to keep Jira as the system of record. So create all of your releases, all of your user stories in Jira. But if, for example, you have a team that is not using Jira, you can always create a qTest project and manage your releases and requirements from qTest without the need of Jira. That's why
I
you
understand.
can.
I understand. Now, what I was trying to find out is, I mean, if accidentally, if somebody creates a new release or delete any one of the release in the qTest, will that reflect in Jira?
No, in this case, no. If you create a release from qTest, you won't see it reflected back in Jira.
So it's not a two-way, it's only one way. It's going to pull and sync releases from the Jira to qTest.
Yeah, and that is by design. Again, we're never pulling your Jira instance. So we'll never bog down your Jira instance, no matter how much testing and how much activity is happening from within qTest. All communication is unidirectional from Jira into qTest.
Okay, gotcha.
It's not bi-directional. Okay. And Andrew, how this qTest is used for reusing the test cases across the cross-functional or cross-project teams between, and also how we can track the traceability between the issues and the test cases, and from the reporting metrics perspective for the leadership reporting perspective, how capable.
So basically, I mean, Rivera is asking for the centralized repository. I mean, he wants to see how the test case can be leveraged between the releases, between the teams, or between the projects.
Sure. So when you decide to create or share a test case, that test case will be put into a instance repository, basically. Let me just find it over here. Go into my projects. This is a list of my projects that exist in qTest right here. So when I send it to that main repository, I can then choose any of these projects to share it with. And as I share it with them, any users inside any of these projects will be able to pull in from that test case without having to recreate it themselves, basically. So in this case, I go back to my manager. Go back to my test cases. I could create a test case repository. In this case, I have my selection of manual test cases. And as long as I choose to have them as shared, they'll appear as part of that main shared repository for people to pull from. So in a different project, I would be able to select this specific test and link it to my requirements.
So Andrew, I do have a question here. So we do have a project where we have created some test cases and we have made it as shared, but the other person who is trying to use these specific test case, right? He needs to know what is the test case name. Do we have any tag mechanism by which he will be able to see what are all the test cases related to a specific thing are shared? Let's say I do want to find some test cases which are related to only pricing. So will you be having any tagging mechanism so that you will be able to list all the test cases which are related to pricing? I don't know regarding the select price option, the test case name. Then how can I reuse that?
Sure. So we do have ways to query your test cases, whether it be by name or the type of field. And likewise, if you want to create certain custom fields to track maybe certain tags, certain custom tags that you use, you'll also be able to do that. And then you can always come to or data query. In here, we have some basic queries that have been created for you. So you can either find all test cases, you can find test cases not yet associated with requirements, unassigned test cases. But likewise, you can create your own custom queries. So in this case, you could filter by a custom field, or you could do it by a specific name, etc. So you could filter through your test cases through our built-in data queries. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah.
So Andrew, if you don't mind, can you create one test cases using the existing test cases from the reusable perspective, how the process flows?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Can you create a one test cases using the existing test cases for reusability? For example, if you want to create the new test cases, but if you want to reuse the existing test cases, how to then pull the new test cases from the existing test cases repository?
Sure. What I can do, and I think will be best for our time, we do have that documented in video. So if you'd like me to send you how we actually share test cases and how we can get it accomplished, I can always follow up with that. What I did wanted to get to before the end of this call, because I think it would be is one of the main features in qTest, is our reporting capabilities, if that is okay with you.
Yes, yeah.
That's okay, but one question, Andrews, the test case that you marked as a shared. So if we have a query that can pull all the shared test cases, that is going to be our centralized repository. Those test cases can be leveraged, right, between the projects and products.
Yes.
If
So
any one of the test cases not been marked as yes, then that is not shareable.
Exactly. So if you haven't marked your test case as shared, that test will only appear visible inside of that specific project. If you mark it as shared, it'll go into a central site repository where then other projects can then choose to pull from that test case.
Understand. The one subsequent question is, Anders, if any one of the test cases shared, and if there are two teams or more than two teams or using the same test case parallelly, how the updates are going to happen?
So when you go to your execution, if I select test cases to run, qTest will ask me whether I want to run the current version that I have or the newest version of the test case. So if there's been any modifications to the test case, I can always tell qTest, I want you to run the newest version, which then would pull the latest version of that test case. Now, if you want two teams to be able to have access to the same test case, but allow them to edit them separately, we do have the ability to copy, paste, etc. Among projects. So you could have two separate copies of that test case that you can manage individually. But with the shared option, you have that master copy of the test case, and using the version history, you can always make sure that you're running the latest copy of that test.
Andrew, I have one question with the subsequent of SAM1. Suppose, is there any test case executed by same test case can be executed multiple users? Is that possible? In that case, are we locking any of that one, or it is creating a new version kind of thing? How that will work? Can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we come to test execution, we can definitely have different test suites, and we can have the same test case being referenced in different test suites. So if you want that same test case being run maybe by 3 different testers, you could do that. If you want to be able to see the results separately, you can always organize them into 2 different test suites. So that way you can keep track of the results that maybe one tester has done with that test versus the results that a different tester has gotten with that test.
So it will create separate test suites here?
Yeah, so the test case itself will just contain the information like the status, the type, the test steps, etc. But then when we come to our executions, the executions basically use a reference of that information and then log that latest execution in here.
Got it. Okay. But it
Perfect.
will be a 3 separate tracker we can able to see on the same test case based on the users executed.
Exactly. As long as you have it in reference in different suites, you'll be able to see those differences in execution. Yeah.
But it's
that
not
will be impacted the reporting, how that will be. Suppose the same test case executed by 3 members unknowingly, but your report showing 3 test cases separately on the report purpose?
And in this case, is that something is that a common occurrence for one test case to be run maybe 3 different times inadvertently?
No, not a common. Just checking, is the tool have any feasibility to not to do the duplicate things?
Yeah, at this point, it would depend on how you organize your test cases. When you're creating these test suites, you can select the specific test cases that you want to run, and then you can assign these test runs to a specific tester. So let's say a manager could assign these test cases and these test suites, that way keeping track that each test is being run appropriately, they're not being repeated. Then, and from the reporting capabilities, you would be able to see if there's more than one run of that test. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew.
I'm not sure, Andrew. Let me put a different way. The Chandra question. I'm not clear that answer. See, example of what you are selected, right? Under the same test suite, not a different test suite, same test suite. So you are executing, enter the vehicle data, one you are executing, same test cases under the same test suite. I'm executing the same test cases in the same test suite. And also if Chandra is also executing the same test case in the same test suite, what happens? So the qTest allows you more than one user execute the test cases, same test cases under the same test suite, or it will not allow you one user after the finishing. So I know this feature ALM did not allow you once you pick this test cases. ALM show it is if it is test cases in progress, it's showing the not completed status. So it will not allow you to until the test instance is completed the execution, the next user.
Got it. So in this case, this is my test suite over here. This is the list of the test cases under these test suite. If I click on one of the individual ones, I can see the execution history. So if there were 3 different testers, I'm sorry, it's reloading over here. If there were 3 different testers that executed this test, for example, you would see in here, hey, Andres executed this test once. Maybe Sam executed the second execution. Maybe somebody else did this one over here. And you'd be able to keep this execution history, be able to see what version each person ran, when that person ran, what they marked it as, failed or passed, and then if they found any defects during that execution. So you'll be able to keep those historical results. Now, if they're running different versions of that test case and you want to keep them separate, you can also do that. For example, in here, you can see that I have about 6 tests that are called automobile inter-vehicle data. But you'll notice that the main difference between these is actually the permutations of variables. So inter-vehicle data 1 includes Audi and Corolla, but inter-vehicle data 2, as an example, if I scroll to the bottom, will include BMW and Edge. So technically, these 2 are different permutations of that data that qTest helped me create using the parameters. And I'm able to account for all those different permutations. But likewise, I'm also able to see the version history. So if this specific test has been run by several people, I'll be able to keep track of all of that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, got it. Thank you, Andrew. And also, we have 8 minutes left. Can you cover the metrics reports from the leadership perspective, how we can project from qTest perspective?
The matrix from qTest to, can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, from the qTest perspective, what are the coverage, test coverage, and also traceability report?
That's a reporting model. Yeah.
Got it. Perfect. Yes, let's get into that real quick. So now that we have all this test data inside of qTest, we can go into Insights. Insights is our main reporting module. Out of the box, qTest already comes with reports ready for you to use. Filtering through the data inside of qTest is pretty easy, especially if we set up or structure in a way that is meaningful for our reports. So we can filter through things like project, for example. I can see all of the projects in my qTest instance in here. I can select them all if I want to see all of the data inside of qTest, or I can select specific ones. In this case, we're just looking at my qTest with Jira project. Likewise, I can go down by test cycles. So I can look at, for example, some of the automation specific results that I brought in. I can filter by modules. So if I want to see, for example, specific releases or test cases that I've brought in, I can do that. And out of the box, it comes with 3 main reports: quality, coverage, and velocity. Right now, we're looking at the quality analysis. In here, you can see things like latest test results by day, and defect status at a glance. If I go into my coverage graph, which is, I think, one of my favorites, we'll be able to see requirement test run coverage, which gives you a heat map of the requirements in your project and which ones need the most attention, maybe because they have the most failures or something isn't not going right in those executions, versus maybe ones that have found no errors or defects. We also see requirements run results as a breakdown. And down here, specifically, we can see all of our requirements broken down by the test cases associated to those requirements, how many test steps, how many total runs, latest test run results, all of it at a glance. Last, we have the velocity dashboard. In here, you can see your tests planned versus executed. You can see the volume of new requirements and test cases and the volume of defects being opened on average. That being said, these are just the out-of-the-box reports. You can also build your own custom dashboards inside of Insights. Out of the box, Insights comes with about 60 pre-made graphs that you'll be able to drag and drop, resize, rename. You'll also be able to quickly find all these pre-made visualizations in the gallery, all sorted by category, so you can easily find what you're looking for. And that being said, these are just the ones that we're giving you out of the box. You are also free to explore any of the data inside of qTest and create your own custom visualizations as needed. That being said, I find that the most successful teams with Insights are the ones who can come up with a structure that makes sense for their process. And using the built-in filters, you can very quickly go as wide or granular in how you like to see your data. Now, the best part about Insights is how we can share our reports. We have 2 options. We can do it through an embed script, which you can hang in something like your company's Confluence page if you're using the Atlassian products, where everyone will have access to this specific dashboard interactively. And is worth noting that the data in it will be in real time as well. So as an example, with my shareable URL, I can either send it specifically to emails, or I can just simply copy it. I can send this URL to anyone in my company. They won't require a qTest license to be able to view the dashboard. And when they access it, qTest will pull in that data in real time. They'll have access to the interactive dashboard and the latest results as needed. So I find this great when you're reporting to management, when you are when there's parties, for example, in Jira that are not involved in testing, but they want to see what the results or what the status of certain testing is happening. Insights is really great to keep your company updated in all of that. Any questions? I know we only have 3 minutes left.
Last question, Andrew. Sorry for that. So,
No, absolutely.
so in the test steps, right? You marked failed one of the test case step. That's fine. But is also manually you marked as a whole test case status as a failed. So is the qTest is also capable to, if any one of the test step is failed, automatically overall the test case status is also failed, or do we need to still do the manually?
When you're running your tests manually with the test pad, yeah, we do give you the option of marking each individual step, and that is mostly so you can keep that historical results, right? So the overall pass or failed will be indicated up here. You can see the green ones have passed, red ones have failed, yellow ones are blocked or have been stopped. But if we scroll to the bottom, let me go to one that maybe has a few more test steps. You'll also be able to keep that that history with the latest execution. So you can very quickly see what was the state of the test pad from the last tester. Hey, he was able to pass all these steps up until this one, and it keeps that history in there. But how you mark the overall test case is usually what the overall result will show. So if I go into my test suite, these overall results are when I mark the overall test case. Make sense?
Yes, yeah. Got it. Thank you.
So Andrew, I have a last question. If we are trying to reuse any test case from a shared project, are we trying to make a copy to that one? Are we trying to get a local copy? Means are we trying to link to the main test case? Are we creating a link to the main case? Or we are getting a totally a local copy which we can use it for ourselves, something like that?
I believe you'll be linking to the original test case. Although let me do a little bit of digging into that, as I don't want to give you the wrong information there. But I do believe you would be referencing the original test case.
Okay. The reason why I asked is if someone is going to make any changes to the original one, then I will be able to get the same updated things onto my local, so that I should not be copying it again and again from the original.
So that is how it works at the moment. If you edit the master copy, those changes will be reflected. To your question though, if somebody makes changes on the copy, I don't believe I don't believe you can make changes in the copy. I believe we would always have to make changes on the master. Yeah.
And it's a wonderful meeting. I think when I got to drop off the other call for another call as well. Only one thing that we did not cover is the automation support from the qTest. So maybe if possible, we can cover it in the next session. Okay.
Yeah, we can always have.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we can always have another one. The way that we bring automation, the way we can schedule and launch automation and manage it from qTest is another one of the features that really sets qTest apart from the competition, and how we can fit into a modern DevOps workflow, agile workflows, while still supporting all of the traditional methodologies and manual testing, which we think is still a very integral part of the testing process. So yeah, absolutely, we can maybe set up another call where we can dive into that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Anders. I think maybe you can share one a cheat sheet of a comparison of the features between the top 3 or 4 tools available in the market, Anders.
Sure, and I'll sync up with John after this, so we can send you guys a package with all this stuff.
No, sounds good. Pretty good.
All right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for setting up
Thank
this
you,
meeting, Joe.
Thank you, Andres. I appreciate it. Thank you,
Thank you.
team.
Okay. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.